Campus to Canton. Campus to Canton on the Better Sports Network.
Matthew, I said last week on this show that this is the show where we talk about players. And how can we be a show where we talk about players without doing a mock draft? Everyone else has done their mock draft on this show. This is groundbreaking stuff. The first Devy/C2C mock draft right here on the Better Sports Network. It's Felix, Sharpe, Matt Bruening. This is Campus to Canton on the Better Sports Network. We will get to the mock draft here in a second. Will Chudy keeping us in line. Before we get to that, this is the doldrums of summer. We're talking about baseball, but we're also talking about recruiting. And Florida, Gainesville, Coach Billy Napier. Is he in over his head, Matthew? Coming from Louisiana Lafayette. They call him G5 Billy, saying that he's might not be long for the job. He had an interesting week on the recruiting trail this week because it started with okay, folks, just listen to me here for a second. It started with a sophomore in high school, a highly touted quarterback for the class of 2026. He reclassified and said, you know what? I'm not graduating in 2 years. I'm not going to go to my junior year. I'm not going to go to my senior year. I'm going to go to college today. Weird in its own right. Even if that was the only story, that would be weird. But it wasn't. So he reclassifies, and we've seen this from time to time. JT Daniels out of Georgia, coming from Mater Dei in California. We've seen Tony Grimes, a corner at UNC, who reclassified, skipped his senior season because of COVID. He didn't want to miss a year of football. The highly touted Quinn Ewers at Texas skipped his senior season so he can enroll at Ohio State early. We see this all the time. We don't see it with sophomores. Usually it's juniors that say they're going to skip their senior season. You have a sophomore who says, I'm skipping my junior and senior season, and I am enrolling at Florida today, this summer. Going to be a part of the football team. That would be a great story if that was the end of the story, but it's not. He said, never mind. Actually, I'm going to go enroll at Ole Miss. So see ya, Billy Napier. And it is the second year in a row where they have lost a high-profile quarterback in a high-profile way. Last year, it was Jaden Rashada, and if you've been listening to the show for a while, we talked about how that Florida NIL deal did not come through for Jaden Rashada. He ends up leaving and going to Arizona State. This is after having not a great season last year with the number 4 overall pick in the draft, Anthony Richardson, at the helm. So things were looking bad for Billy Napier. He has a sophomore that says he's going to enroll in his school, and then the sophomore does the Heisman on him and says, no, thank you. I'm going to play with Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. But then they had a bit of an upswing. All along the trenches. They get a 3-star prospect first. They get a guy from Germany who was getting offers from every camp he went to. Auburn. Some of the other SEC schools. I know he got an offer from Auburn. Noel Portagen. I'm going to just pretend that I pronounced his name right. They get him. They secured the number 16 athlete. Athlete means that they can play multiple positions. Amir Jackson. He commits to Florida. So they get the 3-star. They get the German kid. They get the number 16 athlete in the country. They get Amaris Williams, a 4-star defensive lineman. 4-star defensive lineman in Nasir Johnson. A nose tackle who was in high school, who's 320 pounds, Makai Bordeaux. Again, I'm going to pretend that I pronounced that right. A 4-star linebacker in Aaron Childs, and a 3-star offensive lineman in Marcus Maskell. To make a long story short, Matthew, they went from having a perceived PR problem with 2 high-profile quarterbacks ditching that school to a top 10 class, all within a matter of weeks. Matthew, this was an absolute roller coaster. But the question remains, he still didn't secure the high-profile quarterback, and we know how much of a difference that makes. Does Billy Napier in Gainesville have a PR problem?
No, but I have to address the first issue. Is it RG Palm 12 actually won this week? The over-under was set at 10 minutes before I got a word in. We actually went 5:45. So that's a little bit, I'm a little disappointed, Felix. I was expecting
I'm setting the stage. I'm doing an assist. I'm setting the stage for
I was expecting like a 10-minute soliloquy here on Florida. I don't think that there is an issue, and I don't think he needs Austin Simmons. So give a little bit more background on Austin Simmons. He is very old for what his current class would have been. He's already 18 years old as a sophomore. He has been homeschooled. So if he had stayed in the current class that he was in the 2025 class as a true freshman, he would have been 20 years old. We're talking like
that'd have been an interesting prom night.
Brandon,
yeah,
that's one way to put it. Yeah. I mean, we're talking Brandon Whedon type levels old here at the college football landscape. So he reclassifies to where now he is at the typical age of a true freshman. Where I don't think Florida is struggling with the perception problem on the quarterback side of things. They have DJ Lagway right now, who is, I believe, at least top 5.
A high 4-star. He's a high 4-star quarterback in this year's class.
Yes. And next year's class, the 24 class. So which is the same class that Austin Simmons would have been coming into. So he would have been bringing in 2 quarterbacks instead of 1. He's still got DJ Lagway, who it doesn't look like he's going to veer off. There's still a lot of time. A lot of things could change, but he is a 5-star for 24/7 Sports, a high 4 for everybody else. He's top 10 in the class. And currently, you mentioned the run that they just went on with all these defensive players. They're a top 3 recruiting class in the nation. And last year, they actually finished as a top 12 recruiting class. So they fired Dan Mullen, who I know you were a fan of because of what he was able to do as a play caller with Anthony Richardson, because he cared very little about recruiting. He felt like his system and his ability to coach was going to cause allow the ability for SEC to win in the SEC. They bring in Billy Napier because of the recruiting he was doing in the Sun Belt. Granted, it was the Sun Belt, Fun Belt, a little bit different than the SEC, but he's proving that he can do that with the top 12 class in his first year. That is pretty impressive, especially with where Florida was at or what they currently look like. And then right now, he's at least sitting with the number 3 class. I don't think he'll finish there. He's likely going to fall back into probably a top 10 to 12 range again, because there's teams like Alabama. Georgia is actually up there as the number 1 class, but there's teams like Bama that have not really got it going that I think will jump him. But I don't think as long as he does not lose DJ Lagway, I do not think that there is an issue, because if we're being honest, Austin Simmons jumping 2 classes and then flipping to Ole Miss, I just think that's at the back of Gator fans and that front office and everything. That's the back of their minds. They just don't know that much about him.
Okay, Matthew, number 12, class, whatever. I gave you the over-under on 7.5 wins for Florida this year. What are you taking?
Oh, the under, pretty easy.
Absolutely the under.
Yeah.
Do you think that they're going to let Billy Napier just come around here and put up 5 and 7 seasons and let him coach these alleged highly touted recruits? I don't think so. He still has an image problem.
Oh, yeah.
You have to develop talent. He had one of the best quarterback prospects athletically that we've seen in the last 20 years. Did a poor job of developing him. Ran his system from the Sun Belt and did that stuff with Anthony Richardson. He did the same thing that he did with Levi Lewis that he did with Anthony Richardson. Levi Lewis was his quarterback there at Florida.
No.
The over-under is 5.5. 5.5 for Florida.
Yeah.
That's fine. They still have a perception problem, in my opinion, because, again, of the failure that was Anthony Richards' season. And I know that he was a number 4 pick in the draft, but he had a much higher ceiling. There were several games where they had no designed runs for one of the most athletic quarterbacks that we've seen. So I think that that's a problem. This season is going to be tough for Florida. They might not win 6 games. This is the SEC. Every single game is tough. So I don't care, about that. It's great that they got DJ Lagway and all that stuff. It's great for whoever's going to coach DJ Lagway, because there's a good chance that it's not going to be Billy Napier, in my opinion. I want to ask you this too, Matthew, about the thoughts on players who reclassify, because we've seen this with some highly touted prospects. Here this year, you've got Austin Simmons. We don't know what he'll be. Austin Mack, a quarterback who played his high school football in California, is going to Washington. If you're paying attention to us, we've called Washington a dark horse to be in the playoff this year. Michael Penix Jr., a dark horse for the Heisman Trophy. We would project Austin Mack to replace Michael Penix Jr. He skipped his senior season. He started one season in high school as a junior, skipped his senior season, is enrolling at Washington this year. He is reclassified. In recent seasons, Quinn Ewers, Tony Grimes, highly touted prospects. Quinn Ewers, perfect prospect, allegedly, according to the services. He reclassified. Mixed results on Quinn Ewers. Terrible results on JT Daniels. I wouldn't say terrible. He got injured at USC. And then what's his name, who transferred to Pitt?
Keaton Slovis.
Keaton Slovis took over. JT Daniels loses his job. He transfers to Georgia, doesn't get that starting job either. And now he's at Rice, I think. So
Yeah,
we've seen it's a small sample size, but you need reps in football and you need physical development, and they're not getting it by skipping seasons. So I think that, it's a potential cautionary tale. But like you said, he's a 18-year-old sophomore. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, I want to address the Florida thing before I talk about
18-year-old sophomore. Are you 18-year-old sophomore? What is senior prom? I mean,
it's gonna be.
I don't even know how that works.
It's gonna be.
I don't even know how that works.
He's gonna wherever he's going, the party's gonna be more than likely. They have a very tough schedule. The over/under you mentioned is 5.5. I would fairly comfortably take the under on that. I mean, out of conference, besides having to play, Tennessee, Arkansas, LSU, Florida State out of conference, a big game. They have Georgia every single year, the biggest cocktail party. They get Utah week 1. The only reason they won that game last year was because of Anthony Richardson. He is no longer there. And I don't think it's unfair to say that neither one of the quarterbacks they have there in Graham Mertz or Jack Miller. I forgot the old Ohio State quarterback, Jack Miller the third. Either one of them is really anywhere close to the level of prospect that Anthony Richardson is. So I would easily take the under. As for players reclassifying, it's an intriguing discussion because I don't think we have enough data points on it to really know if it's going to be successful or not. You mentioned JT Daniels. I mean, he did have moments. He looked incredible as a true freshman for USC, then had the injury, missed the rest of the season. Keaton Slovis plays the way that he did. As you mentioned, he transfers to Georgia. He also had injuries in Georgia. I mean, he was supposed to be the starter, then gets injured, and Stetson Bennett comes out. And let's be honest, I was one of them. I criticized them starting Stetson Bennett over JT Daniels. That clearly was the right decision. Dude goes on to win 2 national championships. I don't think we know enough yet about Tony Grimes and Quinn Ewers to say whether they are a success or a failure. There's still time to figure both of those out. Same thing with Austin Mack. He just got to Washington. We love Kalen DeBoer as an offensive play caller. Washington is killing it in recruiting when it comes to these offensive skill positions. There's a realistic shot whether Austin Mack is a good prospect. He could be very successful at the college football level. The one thing I will say about these guys needing the development, I 100% agree with you on the reps. It's kind of been our biggest back and forth between Anthony Richardson, right? You were kind of iffy on he was going to be good, and I was like, he needs game reps. Like, you got to give it to him. With Quinn Ewers and Tony Grimes, who have done that in Austin Mack, the one thing that they will get in, so for anybody who does not know, Felix, you played football in high school and you did go and play in college. Did you not play football in high school?
I was just going to say, you shorted me some experience.
No, I'm giving you. I'm surprised you don't have your national championship ring on. Felix has a national championship. He's probably going to go get in the break.
After the break,
I knew it.
I'll put
Felix
both of them.
Felix is going to come out scratching his head with the national championship ring on his finger. So you can probably, explain better than I can on this part. I actually think it's a better thing for some of these guys to reclassify because you're getting so much more from not just a development standpoint, but also a physical development standpoint. These strength and conditioning programs, I have to imagine in college, are immensely better than what you're getting in high school. Maybe not Quinn being at Southlake, which is the value of that stadium, I believe, is over $1 million. Like it's ridiculous what they do there.
The high school stadium there in Texas.
Yes, South Lake Carroll, Texas. Yes, it's a whole thing. But going to a college, you're getting help and things that you just don't get at the high school level. So I think there is a plus to that. While there is definitely a negative, as you mentioned, not getting those live reps, you're getting a different part of your game developed. And so you're able to get on the field and start. So we'll see. Again, I think Quinn has got this year. Same thing with Tony Grimes. Tony Grimes could go out there and have an amazing year this year. And all of a sudden, if Quinn has a good year and gets drafted in the first round, then you're talking about, okay, well, 2 of the 4 guys that we mentioned have been successful. 1 hasn't. So it's definitely an interesting way to go about it. For our sake, when we've talked a lot about it over the past week, like, I just don't know what this means for Austin Simmons. He went to Ole Miss. We haven't really touched on that much. They've got a loaded QB room. And I would not be surprised if we don't see Austin Simmons even touch the field for 2, maybe even 3 years, because there's a quarterback in the same class now as him, and DeMond Williams, that we both love, that I think is a better player. So it's going to be interesting to see if this reclassifying thing ends up working out for him.
Matthew,
yes.
We have audience members that don't know you are making an inside joke that goes back like 2.5 years. When you talk about you were in on Anthony Richardson and I wasn't. Stop lying to these people.
That's facts.
Stop lying to these people. They don't understand.
Facts.
You're sitting here making an inside joke and people weren't paying attention to us back then. We're big time now. We're on the Better Sports Network. The other piece of recruiting news, I just hit my microphone. We are not professionals at this.
You did. Clearly, Anthony Richardson touches a nerve. We now know that.
We overinflated our abilities when we applied for this job. We did. The other piece that I want to point out is there's a 5-star wide receiver who has been crystal balled to Texas Tech. His name is Micah Hudson, very good player in next year's class. That is significant for a number of reasons, at least in my opinion. They don't hand out 5 stars. When you're handing out a 5-star, you're saying that this player is like a first-round NFL draft pick. You're saying that in high school. They do not hand those out liberally. When they do, especially at wide receiver, those players tend to go to USC, Texas, Alabama, Ohio State. That is it. That is where you find those players going. Today, Micah Hudson was crystal balled to Texas Tech. Significant for this one reason, because I think we're seeing the proliferation of Zach Kittley's influence. If you aren't familiar with Zach Kittley, he was an offensive coordinator. First of all, he was an assistant under Cliff Kingsbury, including when Cliff Kingsbury was at Texas Tech with Patrick Mahomes. He was a longtime assistant there. He went to Houston Baptist, and in 2020, Houston Baptist threw for like 465 yards a game. I had those stats in front of me somewhere. I don't have them now. It was like 465 yards a game. In 2021, he leaves Houston Baptist and he goes to Western Kentucky. Who is his quarterback there at Western Kentucky? One now New England Patriots quarterback, Bailey Zappi, who broke both the passing yardage record and the touchdown record in the NCAA in that 2021 season. Close to 6,000 yards passing in college. And Jareth Stearns, the number 1 receiver for Western Kentucky that year, he had 1,900 yards receiving, almost 2,000 yards receiving. That fun spread system that scores a lot of points. The last year, Zach Kittley took that system to Texas Tech, and he's now the offensive coordinator at Texas Tech. So there's this young, up-and-coming offensive coordinator, someone who's thought to be an innovator in college football, looks to be securing, Matthew, real talent. I actually do have those stats right here. They're in the show sheet. I don't know why. I thought I wrote them down because I'm old and I write stuff down. 460 yards a game. And yes, Kittley and Zappi joined Western Kentucky in 2021. Bailey Zappi threw for 5,967 yards through the air and threw for 62 touchdowns. He beat Joe Burrow's touchdown record by 2, and he beat the passing yards record by like 300 or so. I want to get your reaction to this, Matthew, when we come back. I think that this is big. You're getting a 5-star wide receiver go to an okay Big 12 program, but not one of the elite programs. Let's talk about the implications. I'm going to go get my championship rings. That's when we come back. It's Felix Sharpe, Matt Bruening. This is Campus to Canton on Better Sports Network.
Campus to Canton.
Breece Hall right now, and I've talked to plenty of high-stakes players, I'm sure you have too, Kev. Had Hall not torn his ACL last year, he might have been the 101 in drafts this year. That's how good he was looking last year, and obviously with the addition of Aaron Rodgers. At the 305, running back 11 behind Derrick Henry and Ramondre Stevenson, right ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs and Najee Harris. Your thoughts on him as a mid-third round pick? How have you been attacking him? Have you been getting him at that spot so far this year?
Yeah, if I start out with 2 wide receivers, Breece Hall is right at the top of the queue coming into the third. If I knew he'd be healthy for week 1, I was still a little.
Well, he'd be going higher than the mid third.
Right. He may go 101 or well, RB1 at least.
Yeah.
But I don't think we know that even if he's healthy in spring and the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I still like if I'm running a team, if I'm the coach, I'm bringing him back slow. Like he's on a pitch count. Like I want him for the end of the season because I got Aaron Rodgers for the playoffs, right? Like even if he's fully healthy, I would work him in slow. But that is actually what you want. Like he's still going to get the high value touches. So yeah, if we know he's healthy, he's a first rounder. So like if he's sitting there in the third, especially when I get 2 wide receivers to start, I'll take Hall all day.
Yeah, it almost makes me think that the uncertainty with Breece Hall has made him unfairly fall too far, right? Like because we're talking about the team here in June. They're still hoping that he's ready for week 1. This is not, oh, we'll see what happens. Oh, we're taking it day by day. Oh, we're liking how he's coming along. No, they still think by week 1. And the fact that we have that timeline, I think, maybe bumps him up, especially as the drafting season gets deeper and deeper here in July and August. Maybe we start seeing him go up the boards as well.
Felix Sharpe, Matt Bruening. This is Campus Canton on Better Sports Network. For the uninitiated, if we do a good job on that first segment, Will Chudy, our producer, he rewards us with good music. You must have liked that first segment. You did a good job, Matthew.
You know, when you're right on Anthony Richardson, I agree with you.
Nobody. Okay. You're making inside jokes that nobody's getting. And yes, now I have my. So, one thing I've noticed in watching 2 of my mentors in this industry, Keith Irizarry and Mark Malusis, Moose and Keith, check them out. When the real sports journalists do TV, they don't move all over the place in the camera. I'm very animated when I talk, and I'm trying to be still. I'm trying to be a little bit more still and be a professional.
Just be you. That's what makes the show great.
You're giving me a compliment?
I mean, look, I've been getting a lot of praise for my great cause lately. I figured I'd throw a little bit of love your way.
When we went to break, we were giving a recruiting update and talking about 5-star wide receiver Micah Hudson. 5-star wide receiver. He didn't commit to, it's not a commitment. A crystal ball is a prediction. It's a prediction. It's basically an expert prediction from 24/7 Sports saying, based on our information, we think this is where this guy is going. That prediction wasn't Ohio State. That prediction wasn't Texas. That prediction wasn't USC. It wasn't Alabama. It was Texas Tech. I can't remember the last time they would have gotten like a big-time wide receiver recruit like this. I don't even know if Michael Crabtree, I don't remember what his pedigree was coming into college. I know he was productive there. But it is a big deal, Matthew, for a 5-star wide receiver to be crystal ball predicted to go to a place like Texas Tech. It may be a sign that Zach Kittley and what he's doing there with that program, that kids are starting to pay attention because they know they can get numbers.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Look, Micah Hudson is a fantastic player. We've been doing recruiting stuff for about 3 years now, or 2.5 with Campus to Canton, and I believe right now Micah Hudson is currently graded as our highest wide receiver ever to come from the high school ranks in the 2.5 years that we've been doing it. He is, when you talk about the perfect receiving prospect, I mean, so he's listed 6'1", 190. We have him tracked at 21.4 miles per hour. Anything over 21 is good, but for a wide receiver to be running 21.4, to then add in the fact that he is not only a speed threat, he is a contested catch dude. I mean, all you have to do for anybody listening to this, once you're done with the show, obviously, just type Micah Hudson into YouTube and watch his one-handed grabs over defensive backs, toe tapping in the end zone. He can make amazing catches all over the field. He's got great moves off the line, incredible burst and speed within his routes to create separation. What is going to be intriguing, though, is Texas Tech right now does not have a good quarterback. I know Zach Kittley's offense is very intriguing, but I think he'll thrive regardless of where he goes. What's made this a very interesting, at least prediction, is Texas has been very much in the running for Micah Hudson as well. And we know Steve Sarkisian's track record with wide receivers, and it's pretty damn impressive. So if Zach Kittley is able to kind of, I would say, honestly, steal Micah Hudson away, because he was the top wide receiver in Texas last year as a junior. Now he's going into his senior year this year and is probably going to do the same thing. And then a school like Texas can't land him. It's going to be truly intriguing what this means, not just for the recruiting landscape moving forward, but Texas Tech, because we've seen when you're able to get a guy like this, you're able to bring in subsequent more players, better recruiting classes. Like I'm truly intrigued to see if he ends up going to Texas Tech. It's very surprising he got that crystal ball to them.
Now, we thought that Zach Kittley could be a candidate to be the offensive coordinator at Alabama. On our platform, Campus to Canton, wherever you get your podcast, we've talked a lot about Zach Kittley's trajectory. 1 year at Western Kentucky, set record-setting numbers. 1 year at Texas Tech, he was okay, but it was first year there. To get a recruit like this, I mean, he is someone that we predict would be the offensive coordinator at one of those blue blood schools that we just mentioned. But if he can recruit like this, there's no reason to go, because who's the competition in the Big 12? Oklahoma? Zach Kittley can beat Oklahoma with his system if he gets the right quarterback, if he gets recruits like Micah Hudson.
I mean, realistically, there is no competition for them. Oklahoma and Texas are gone next year, and that's when Micah Hudson will be coming in. So, I mean, who are you really – like, I mean, does Houston – so if you're looking at the offenses now, I guess you would say Houston and UCF, with the way they've been able to play in the G5, though, can they replicate that at the Power 5 stage? In the Big 12 would probably be the other two best offenses currently.
So we're looking at potentially in 2 years, if everything stays together, Texas Tech could be a power in a depleted Big 12 conference, which is better than being, a weaker program in a more substantive conference. So we'll pay attention to that. All right, Matthew, are you ready to make history on the Better Sports Network?
Yeah, let's do it.
We have never done a Devy mock draft. Everyone else has done their dynasty rookie drafts. They've done their redraft drafts, all of that stuff. There has never been a college draft on this network, and we're going to make history right now. Now, let me set this up, because we are Campus to Canton. Campus to Canton is the name of our website. It is also the name of a format. In a Campus to Canton format, you have a full NFL team and a full college team. That means you're playing college fantasy every single week. So we talked about Anthony Richardson. I got Anthony Richardson on a lot of rosters. Last year, I would start him.
You're welcome, by the way. You're welcome.
They're going to think that you're serious, that you were with me on Anthony Richardson. Just tell the people that you're making an inside joke that nobody gets.
What are you talking about? It's okay. Just admit it, Felix. You got your national championship rings on. It's okay. Continue. What makes Campus to Canton so great? Continue. But you are.
Well, it's great because you're playing more fantasy football. So, Bryce Young, Bijan Robinson, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jordan Addison, those players were rostered in our leagues. Not only were they rostered, when Jordan Addison would go off against Utah or UCLA, boop, 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 we got those points. Our win column, you're playing just, regular fantasy football, but on the college side. And then when those players declare for the NFL draft, they're added to your NFL team. Now, the difference between Devy and C2C, which is short for Campus to Canton, is that in a Devy league, you draft college players, but those players just sit. They don't accumulate points until they're added to your NFL team. That's what's great about Campus to Canton. So from a strategy perspective, usually when you do a startup for a Campus to Canton league, the first 8 rounds or so are strictly Devy. What does that mean? These are players that we predict are going to the NFL, regardless of whether or not they score a lot of points in college. For example, J.J. McCarthy, 5-star quarterback. A lot of people think that he's a potential first-round NFL draft pick, but Michigan don't let him throw the ball a lot. So he's not someone that you're going to start on the college side of your C2C league, but he would still get drafted high in our format because of that potential NFL pedigree. Georgia's backfield. Georgia, they put up what? Todd Gurley, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, DeAndre Swift. But when those guys were in college, they didn't score a lot because they all split the backfield with each other. Now, Nick Chubb and Sony Michel did relatively well. But generally speaking, like Kirby Smart has always split time with those guys, even though they go on to become late day 1 or early day 2 NFL draft picks. So again, like that type of player would get drafted, and then they would probably sit on the bench for a while because you can't start a running back who's going to get 600 yards and 5 touchdowns in a season. You got these people in the G5 and the MAC and the Mountain West who are running for 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns. All right, I think I've set the stage enough to inform people on what we're doing, Matthew. We're going to have to move fast here because, Matthew, you've been talking too much, and we need to get this in, okay? So I need you to keep your answers short.
Okay.
We're going to do a mock draft here. I don't know. We'll see how many rounds we can get. But, Matthew, you have been graced with the first pick, which, despite what that ticker just said, hasn't been made yet. Matthew, go ahead.
So I just want to clarify real quick. Are we doing a Devy mock draft or a Campus to Canton mock draft? Because you said Devy twice, and then you explained Campus to Canton. I'm just double checking before I make my pick. Not that it really matters, but
this is an argument that we've always had. I think that the first 5 rounds or so are going to be the same regardless of format.
They are, but if we get past that, I need to know what I'm doing here, boss.
There's no way with how much you're talking that we're going to get past.
All right,
like
I'm going
rounds.
to say we're doing a Campus to Canton mock draft startup. So regardless in both formats, you're doing Caleb Williams 1-1. It's always hard to project quarterback success, but with everything he's done at USC, coming from that Lincoln Riley tree, multiple Heisman winners, multiple first-round picks, I just don't think. And again, as you mentioned in explaining the format, the points that he will score you this year, unless there's an injury, he's going to be the number 1 quarterback in the format for Campus to Canton, be a first-round pick. He's the home run number 1 pick.
I think that this number 2 pick is also potentially a home run, and that is UNC quarterback Drake May, who is widely regarded as the quarterback 2. He's in North Carolina. They did lose Josh Downs, but they acquire Devontae Walker, a big size speed threat that's similar to Christian Watson, who could also be a day 1 or day 2 NFL draft pick in his own right. He comes from Kent State to join UNC. I like what they got there offensively. And what people don't realize is they see Caleb Williams running the ball back there, and they don't give Drake May the credit. Drake May nearly had 1,000 yards rushing last year, way more than the 600 or 400, something like that Caleb Williams had. Drake May is a true dual threat who can run, who can throw, who can. The one thing that I really love about Drake May, and you've heard me say this a lot, is how good he is with pump fakes in the red zone and finding space. It's something that reminds me of Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers had a long streak of not turning the ball over in the red zone because of what he could do with the pump fake and move people with his eyes. And I see a lot of that with Drake May. He's got to play better against the elite defenses in the ACC. Clemson, got to play better. North Carolina State, got to play better in that rivalry. Those types of games, he's got to play better. But he was a first-year starter last year. He's going into his second year. I think he's going to declare for the NFL draft after this. Matthew, I need you to keep your answers shorter. We're at the pick 3. Let's go.
All right, so number 3 for me is one of the only other players at the top of their pool that I would say is guaranteed first-round pick, regardless of what happens this year. And that's Marvin Harrison Jr., Ohio State wide receiver. Dude is amazing. He can do everything. I'm going to give Felix some credit here, as I know he's kind of in his feels about the Anthony Richardson thing. I mean, me and Felix were both telling you Marvin Harrison Jr. was a top 20 wide receiver as a true freshman before he ever took a snap on the field, and he's gone out there and shown he's going to dominate again this year. He's probably a top 5 pick in the NFL draft next year. And again, he's going to score you a ton of points this year in that Ohio State offense.
There's a good chance that the 3 players that we've just picked, that they could go off the board 1, 2, and 3 in the NFL draft next year. That would not surprise me at all. This next player will not be drafted next year because he is not draft eligible, but he is my number 1 running back, regardless of format, and that is Penn State running back Nicholas Singleton. This is a guy who's really, really explosive. You talked about 21 miles per hour being a threshold. Nicholas Singleton in high school hit 22 miles per hour. He was our fastest recorded player for that class. And he did it at 210 pounds. This is a guy who runs with a lot of force. If you're a DB and you're 180 pounds, you do not want to tackle this guy because he runs violently. The thing that I like about him, though, is that he is one of those players that splits time. Katron Allen at Penn State, great back in his own right, went to IMG Academy. IMG is like the prep school of all prep schools in Florida. They send players to Alabama. They send players to Ohio State. So I love that Nicholas Singleton is splitting time. It reminds me of a Felix Jones, Darren McFadden backfield that they had at the old Arkansas days. Matthew, you're old enough to remember. You're like you're closer. Yeah. So you remember that. But great backfield there. Lawrence Maroney and Marion Barber at Minnesota. I almost lost it there. But a great backfield there at Penn State. At the number 4 pick, I'm taking Nicholas Singleton. Matthew, you got to go faster.
So pick 5 here. There's some interesting running backs, but I don't know that any of these guys get first-round draft capital, but another player that will is another Ohio State wide receiver in Emeka Egbuka. And I think he's been widely overshadowed because of how good Marvin Harrison Jr. was. Last year, he finished in his first true season as a starter with the number 5th receiving yard season ever in Ohio State history. Now, yes, Marvin Harrison finished with number 1. That's still pretty impressive when you go back through the list of wide receivers that Ohio State has had. I think that there's no way this dude drops out of the top 15. He can play inside, outside. He's just a very good wide receiver, also a return specialist, so he would be my pick at 5.
All right, I can go a lot of different ways here at the number 6 pick, but I want to be safe, and there's probably no safer prospect than Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. Now, he is small, but he's super athletic, about 700 yards receiving last year. He tended to be a deep threat, a tight end being a deep threat for Georgia. I know we just saw Kyle Pitts come from Florida, and he hasn't really popped the same way that we've wanted to. But when you get a super uber athletic tight end, back-to-back national champion, remember, he's the reason Darnell Washington, who was drafted by the Steelers, why he didn't start. It's because it's Brock Bowers. I'm insulating some value here. Brock Bowers is going to be taken on day 1 or day 2. In Devy, if you're playing Devy, you're playing C2C. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of projection. I think that we can safely project Brock Bowers' draft capital, even though he's a little bit undersized. So I'm taking him here at number 6.
At 7, and I feel like I'm being a homer with my last 3 picks, but you have to do Travion Henderson, running back at Ohio State, is the next best running back in the pool after Nick Singleton. Obviously, Felix already took him. I don't know that Henderson's going to get first-round draft capital like it looked like he might after his freshman season. Really bad season last year, but he has a chance splitting time with Mayan Williams this year for Ohio State to kind of return some of that value. I expect him to be an early second-round pick, and he is a player that can do it all. He's a guy that can take it to the house when he's rushing, but he's also a very good receiving threat. He's not the fast, but he's an overall very good running back. So I'm going to take him as a safe pick. I was going to go Brock Bowers, but since you took him, I think he's the next safest pick on the board. I'm going to take Travion Henderson.
No, the next safest pick is actually draft eligible next year, and that is running back Raheem Sanders, who provides more thump than Travion Henderson. Travion Henderson is more of a Reggie Bush type, somebody you want to get in space, somebody who's not necessarily physical. Raheem Sanders, former wide receiver, 6'2", 230 pounds, who wears that weight well, and he will clock you. He will clock you with a stiff arm, with a lowered shoulder, and he has that receiving background. At number 8, I am going Raheem Sanders. right here from Arkansas. Matthew, we're going to go to break. We're going to go to break. When we come back, we're going to get through this draft. I'm going to be faster. You're going to be faster. And we're going to get through at least 2 rounds. It's Felix Sharpe, Matt Bruening. This is Campus2Canton on Better Sports Network.
I feel like this is a quietly contentious point in Dynasty Fantasy Football, what it means to actually be rebuilding. Some people say you should never truly be rebuilding. How do you view the rebuilding versus competing dichotomy in Dynasty?
So I will be the first person to acknowledge that my preferred format of fantasy football is just redraft. The years that I have played Dynasty, it has been I've drafted a win now team because I've seen people that have just gotten into the cycle of rebuilding and thus they just don't make any progress. So if you're rebuilding for the 5th year in a row, I just, I don't know exactly how you get out of it, but yeah, it's definitely something that can happen. And a lot of people, especially when we come out of the NFL draft, everyone's just instantly shipping off, draft picks and everything. So, I mean, it's definitely something that can happen.
Joey, do you feel similarly to it? Do you feel like you see people getting stuck in the rebuilding loop?
I mean, I would say people that try to rebuild in the beginning of seasons, of their fantasy seasons, I see them get stuck in that rut. I would really try to only ever rebuild if I knew I was going to miss the playoffs. Like, I'm always trying to play to win, even if it's maybe I don't know.
I think my big thing is the word rebuild is a much shorter time frame than I think most people say it should be. Like, they look at rebuild as like 3 years out competing. Rebuild, you're looking to compete next season. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing it now, you're looking to revamp, and maybe there's a 1 season where you ship it off, but that very next season you should be competing. If you're doing it like that, I'm cool with it, but you got to have a plan, not just keep getting the young players, keep getting the draft picks. Otherwise, you end up like Tim. Maybe not like Tim who gets a bye, but you make the playoffs, you're in that like 4 to 6 range every year, just hovering in the middle. Nothing ever gets better, nothing ever gets worse.
I think I play like you in Dynasty, Simon. I play in 3-year windows.
100%. That's my go-to. And with the rate at which Dynasty leagues turn over, you should really only ever play in a 3-year window.
I was going to say, I don't know what to make of having no music from the rejoin. I mean, what does that mean? I would have
That's
just
probably
been,
really that we're about to get a letter in the mail that we're fired. Is
That's
probably what that means.
I've been waiting for that letter for like since August, by the way. Felix Sharpe, Matt Bruening. This is Campus2Canton on Better Sports Network. We're doing a mock draft here, the first ever Debbie Campus2Canton mock draft on the Better Sports Network. The picks thus far, actually, they're scrolling along the ticker there at the bottom. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Marvin Harrison Jr., Nicholas Singleton, Emeka Ibuka, Brock Bowers, Travion Henderson, Raheem Sanders was my last pick. Matthew, I think the interesting thing about this 2023 season is that there's a lot of new names. That 2023 NFL draft class took a lot of brand name guys, a lot of household names in the college football space. So we're even early in this draft, we're going to be taking players who are not known commodities, who haven't had a lot of time starting, but that's kind of the great thing about projecting these players for their college seasons and for the NFL. Matthew, you're here at the number 9. I just took Raheem Sanders. Who you got?
Before I make my pick, since we're doing a draft, I do want to tell you guys about the Fantasy Alarm Football Draft Guide, which is available. You guys need to check it out. It is amazing. It is with a subscription. Go to fantasyalarm.com. You can purchase it for $26.99 or get it for free with a monthly or annual all-pro subscription to Fantasy Alarm. I mean, you've got to do it. It's incredible. If you're getting ready for your rookie drafts, now's the time to do it. It's going to get you extremely prepared for that, and you're going to dominate your league, like I am doing in this draft by taking Quinn Ewers here.
Why are you doing this?
Because he's going to have an amazing season this year with Steve Sarkisian. His season was arguably bad, last year. Arguably, there was some very well hidden advanced metrics that made it look like his season were good. He had the multiple injuries, but it's a second year with Steve Sarkisian. We know his history in developing quarterbacks as well, and he has all the talent around him. I am betting on him being able to put it all together, and if he does, you mentioned earlier, he is the perfect prospect, and we've seen that in the NFL, that matters, whether we like it or not. Recruiting pedigree matters. If he goes out there and has that season with the recruiting pedigree, the Texas name on his helmet, he's going to be a first-round draft pick, so give me Quinn Ewers.
That's a lot of projection there. We would have to do a whole show on why you're wrong about Quinn Ewers and why this is too early. You're swinging for the fences, and you're probably going to hit a grounder right to the pitcher. So right. I'm going to go with Evan Stewart, who is a high floor player. It's baseball season, so I'll say he's a doubles hitter, a high floor player, just technically sound. If you want to go see one of his better games, go watch his game against JaQuincy McKinstry. The cornerback for Alabama had a great game in that matchup against Texas A&M, which was a closer game than we thought. But Evan Stewart, technically sound. Last year was his freshman season. He's going to be the focal point of that offense for Texas A&M this year. At number 10, give me the high floor player, wide receiver Evan Stewart out of Texas A&M.
All right. As my good friend Chris Moxley once told me, scared money don't make money. And I'll be making money with that Quinn Ewers pick, just like I'm going to be making money with this next pick, because we have not seen him do much either, and that is one Drew Allar, Penn State quarterback. Said it before on this network. I think there's a shot Penn State has the best offense in the Big Ten. That includes one Michigan and the Ohio State University in there. Drew Allar has all the talent in the world, not just in his arm, but he is a rushing threat as well. We saw some pretty miraculous throws from him last year as a true freshman. Now he gets into that offense with the running backs that he has. Wide receiver core is a little bit scary, but if Mike Yurcich allows him to open it up, I think Allar could have a very good season. And in my opinion, he's a lock, at least right now, to be the number one quarterback drafted in that class. So you're going to get the NFL upside as well.
You took Quinn Ewers. You should have taken Drew Allar. That's who the quarterback 3 is for me. You reached on Quinn Ewers. But you know what? I'm going to take our first freshman. Now, remember, we probably didn't say this. We all consider this super flex tight end premium. So there's a lot of quarterbacks going here. I'm going to take the first freshman out of Detroit King, who was committed to Oregon, but flipped his commitment to Chip Kelly's UCLA Bruins. He's my number one QB in a very highly touted freshman quarterback class. Give me UCLA's Dante Moore. That rounds out the first round of this NFL draft, this Campus2Canton mock draft. Caleb Williams, Drake May, Marvin Harrison Jr., Nicholas Singleton, Emeka Ibuka, Brock Bowers, Travion Henderson, Raheem Sanders, Quinn Ewers, Evan Stewart, Drew Allar, Dante Moore rounds out the first round. Matthew, let's go to the second round. You're up first.
Yeah, so with this pick, there's a lot of interesting players on the board, but I'm going to take Wisconsin running back Braylon Allen. He's a big bruising back, but can run over 21 miles per hour. He falls into a very elite group of running backs that are very over 220 pounds, but can also run extremely fast. The receiving we have not seen from him yet as a true extension of his game. Hopefully we get a little bit of that this year, but even not, I think just because of how good he is as a runner, how powerful he is as a runner, he's got some kind of future in the NFL, and he should hopefully have a very good year for Wisconsin. So give me the best running back left on the board, in my opinion, in Braylon Allen.
You keep almost taking the right player, but you missed again here. You should have taken Georgia running back Branson Robinson. He is the thumper. He's the one who's the perfect combination of size and speed. And I can't wait to see him for Georgia. Last year was a freshman. Last year is a sophomore. This year, a second-year player. Great reviews in the spring. He's going to get more carries, more of that market share of that Georgia backfield. And trust me, there's a chance that Georgia backfield and that Georgia offense is a little bit more explosive with Carson Beck at the helm than it was with Stetson Bennett. So at the 201 here, or 202 in this draft, give me Branson Robinson, running back Georgia.
At the 203, I'm going to take Xavier Worthy. I don't love the pick. But again, Sark offense, Quinn Ewers should, as I just mentioned, he's going to have an amazing year. I'm going to put my foot down. Quinn Ewers is going to have a great year. Xavier Worthy is going to benefit from that. We've seen what Steve Sarkisian has been able to do with wide receivers, going all the way back to John Ross at Washington, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Marquise Lee in USC, going to Alabama, Jalen Waddle, Jerry Jeudy, Devonta Smith. Like, he has had an amazing run of wide receivers. Xavier Worthy will be the next good wide receiver for Sark to go into the NFL draft. Might be a stretch to say he gets first round draft capital, but overall I think he's going to be a very Marquise Hollywood Brown type player in the NFL.
Well, you said you don't like the pick, Matthew, because you're not doing a good job. So that's why you don't like the pick. I'm going to take the next up after Caleb Williams at USC. That is freshman quarterback Malachi Nelson, who's my number 2 quarterback, a drop back pocket passer. I think he's going to have success in Lincoln Riley's system. Lincoln Riley's going to have, oh my goodness, how many number 1 overall picks? Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, and Caleb Williams is 3.
Drake might go number 1 next year. No, I'm just saying.
It's gonna be Caleb Williams. And then the next after that, 4 will be Malachi Nelson. That's why you don't like the pick, Matthew, because you should have taken Malachi Nelson instead of Xavier Worthy.
No, I disagree. I'm perfectly fine with that. So, golly, I really don't love anybody here. Do I want to go freshman? I'm going to take the number 1 freshman wide receiver for me, who I think he's already been amazing at USC's camp. He's going to be paired with Malachi Nelson moving forward, but will be playing in the slot likely this year for USC, getting Caleb Williams. That is one Zachariah Branch, freshman wide receiver for USC. Incredible speed threat compared a lot to Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, you know who's actually an incredible speed threat, and that was one of the best kick returners last year in the country. Also had his best game of the season against a Georgia defense at home at Kroger Field. That's Kentucky freshman wide receiver, sophomore wide receiver this year, Barian Brown, one of the most explosive players in the country. If you think, Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown at Arizona, John Ross-ish, he's on that spectrum. Explosive player, and he can return kicks, one of the best in the country. Here at the 206, give me Barian Brown.
Speaking of freshman wide receivers, I'm going to take one Antonio Williams, who was arguably the best freshman wide receiver last year just based on a pure stats argument, and was playing with a bad quarterback situation. And DJ, most of the year, and K. Klubnik coming in late. He's going to be the leader in that Clemson offense, which we expect to take a step forward, getting TCU's offensive coordinator from last year, Garrett Riley, and the way that they pass the ball. So I will take Antonio Williams, wide receiver, Clemson.
I can't believe I'm getting this value here. I mean, I'm doing an excellent job if I don't say so myself. I'm getting the freshman running back who ran for the most yards in his freshman class last year. He's going to have the backfield all to himself this year at Ole Miss after splitting time with Zach Evans last year. Give me Quinshon Judkins at the 208. If this is a Campus2Canton league, I could potentially have 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns, 25 receptions. I got an RB1 here at the end of the second round. Quinshon Judkins, Matthew, you should feel ashamed of yourself because of how you're doing in this draft, and you should give me compliments.
Yeah, no, I'm good. So I am also going to take a running back, true freshman, going to Alabama, Justice Hayes, who I think is a phenomenal player in this class. He's already, again, surprised and been extremely highly touted by Nick Saban, who does not go out of his way to tout anybody, much less a freshman. Likely going to be a small-time player for them this year. He's probably not going to get a lot of work, but then could command that backfield next year after Jace McClellan goes into the NFL. And we've seen what these Alabama running backs can do, and he does it all. Great running back and a receiving threat. So Justice Haynes.
All right, you put me in a tough position here. Look, both of us love Justice Haynes. We got to talk to him and his dad on the Campus2Canton podcast feed. You can find that on YouTube. You can find it on the Campus2Canton podcast feed. Good kid. He's going to be an excellent player. I'm going to go. This is starting to get tough just a little bit. I'm going to go with Michigan running back Donovan Edwards. Now, we saw what he did against your Ohio State Buckeyes last year, running for over 200 yards. But the thing about Donovan Edwards that is so interesting to me is that his comparison, according to 24/7 Sports, and I think it's an apt one, is Alvin Kamara, because what he can do in the passing game. You don't see that at Michigan because they don't use the running backs in that way. But this is a guy who lined up at wide receiver at West Bloomfield High School in Michigan. He's a guy that had a 10 reception game in his freshman year at Michigan. He's going to get more of the carries this year for Michigan after coming in for an injured Blake Corum last year. And it's that dual threat skill set that's going to make him an excellent fantasy asset. Give me at the 210 Michigan running back Donovan Edwards.
At 211, I'm going back to the freshman pool. This is likely the cheapest you're going to be able to get some of these players. I know it feels early, especially with guys that we have not seen, but Jonte Cook, we talked a lot about Micah Hudson earlier. Jonte Cook II, who is going to Texas. is also a phenomenal wide receiver, and you could argue the best in this class. Again, going to Texas to be paired with Sark and his track record with developing wide receivers. He's also going to have Quinn Ewers throwing him ball this year, and then either Malik Murphy or Arch Manning moving forward. So he's going to have a ton of quarterback talent around him. This kid can do anything and everything on the field at the wide receiver position. Likely a stud for 3 years for you before going into the NFL. So Jonte Cook, the second Texas wide receiver for me here at 211.
I'm just going to let the value fall to me as I've been doing this entire time. That means I'm going to take Texas running back Cedric Baxter, the freshman wide receiver. His comparison is Joe Mixon-ish. He was running with the ones in the spring game after Bijan Robinson left, after Roschon Johnson left to the Bears, Bijan Robinson with the Atlanta Falcons. They don't have an established guy. Well, Cedric Baxter is the only 5-star freshman running back, according to all of the services in this class, even higher ranked than Justice Haynes. And I love Justice Haynes, but Cedric Baxter is going to Texas. Steve Sarkisian has an excellent track record with producing statistics for running backs. This is an easy pick. Give me Cedric Baxter here at the 212. We're now into the third round. Let me recap the second round here really quick. Wisconsin running back Braylon Allen, Georgia running back Branson Robinson, Texas wide receiver Xavier Worthy, USC quarterback Malachi Nelson, USC wide receiver Zachariah Branch, Kentucky wide receiver Barian Brown, Clemson wide receiver Antonio Williams, Ole Miss running back Quinshawn Judkins, Alabama running back Justice Haynes, Michigan running back Donovan Edwards, Texas wide receiver Jonte Cook, and Texas running back Cedric Baxter. Oh, I am smoking you in this draft, Matthew. Let's go to the third round.
I mean, at least I still got Anthony Richardson. For 3-1, I'm taking Luther Burden. He was a number 1 wide receiver in his class last year and a highly rated player for us. He had a good season for Missouri last year. We do a year 1 0 theory. He broke every single one of those. And in our history of doing that, a player that has broken every single one of the 9 metrics has always gone on to see success in college and the NFL. Now, he's at Missouri, which is scary, but they bring in offensive coordinator Kirby Moore, who took a player kind of like him in Jalen Moreno-Cropper and made him into a stud for the most part. And they also brought in Jacob Healer, the wide receiver coach, who has been known for developing A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf. I think Luther Burden takes a massive step forward this year, and he has that NFL potential. So get a guy like that in the third round is a steal for me.
You keep taking these players that are overrated, and we didn't have to do a whole show about why Luther Burden is overrated, why Quinn Ewers is overrated. Luther Burden doesn't go past the line of scrimmage. He doesn't get downfield. This is a reach here. I'm going to take the next man up after Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's Carnell Tate, another IMG Academy product who's had an excellent spring. Nothing but great things hearing about him here in the third round. I'm getting a wide receiver who's going to fill in, who's going to be the next X at Ohio State. I think that's some value there. Give me Carnell Tate at the 302.
We got a minute, bud. I'm not making a pick. You're going to have to find out next week who I take here.
Well, I tell you what, Matthew, I smoked you on this draft.
So
you reached for Quinn Ewers.
No,
you reached for Luther Burden. Luther Burden is an athletic player, but he has not produced.
Will, do you have the drop accusations? Felix loves that. It's accusations. Amazing picks by me so far. So I killed this draft.
Let us know at Better Network. Tag me at Sharpe Review. Tag at Sports Fanatic MB. Let us know. Peace, everybody.
It's good. It's good. The job is done. We can go home now.